So reading through this code, you'll see that on line 6 through 8, we're essentially just declaring variables that will stand for the pins. So we're saying that VRX will be equal to pin A0, VRY is equal to pin A1, and SW is equal to pin 2. When you see A0 and A1, those are analog pins, and 2 is a digital pin. Then from lines 10 to 16, we're essentially setting default values for different variables. So we're saying we're creating a variable called X position, which is 0, Y position, which is equal to 0 at baseline, SW underscore state, which will be equal to 0. That's going to monitor essentially whether or not we're pressing the joystick in, pressing the button. Map X and map Y are going to be the mapped values of the X and Y position, and map SW is going to be the default value for the mapped value for the switch. The mapping is really just for graphical representation more than anything. So after that, we have the setup function, and we are setting up serial.begin 9600. That's the communication. You essentially need that whenever we're using an Arduino Uno and we want to talk to serial. And then we have lines 22 through 24, where we're essentially designating the pin mode. So we have pin mode for the VRX and VRY. Those are input pins. Those are analog inputs. And then we have the pin mode SW, which is going to be referring to the switch. And that one is input underscore pull up, and that's for the digital input. And then underneath that, we have the loop. And in the loop function, first thing we're doing is we're setting the X position equal to the analog read of the VRX, the Y position equal to analog read of the VRY. So those are the 2 dimensions of the joystick. And then the SW state is going to be equal to whatever the value, essentially the read from the switch going on and off from the digital pin. Notice this says digital read while the other ones say analog read. And then map X and map Y and map SW. So mapping is really simple concept. If you look at line 4, I kind of just mentioned the syntax there. So what that's saying is that we're taking a certain value. So map X, for example, on line 32 is taking the X position, and it's saying, hey, the values originally were between 0 and 1023, but I want to remap those. I want to make those equal to negative, I want to essentially reposition those so that 0 is equal to negative 512, and 1023 is equal to a positive 512, and anything in between there scales accordingly. And that's the same thing for map Y and map SW. And really, I'm doing this only for the sake of the serial plotter because it makes things easier to read. And then we have serial.print. You'll see that we have 3 lines for the X, 3 lines for the Y, and 3 lines for the SW. And when you print it like that, we're actually able to get 3 separate lines drawn on the serial plotter. And then, of course, we have a delay of 100 seconds. So that's saying, every 1/10 of a second, repeat this loop. All right. And so that's pretty much it for reading through the code.
So we'll start by looking at the joystick itself, and you'll notice that there are 5 wires connected into the pins. The pins are the ground, the 5 volt, the VRX, and the VRY, which are determining how far you've pulled the joystick in either direction, and the switch, which is essentially, pressing it in and out. And if you notice, the switch is literally actually just a switch right down there where you have the white little knob that when you push in on the joystick, it just activates the switch. Okay? So you can see how the different wires are attached, and now let's look at the Arduino board itself. Looking at the board, you'll see that I have attached the switch over to pin number 2, which is the white one. That's the digital pin. You'll notice on the left-hand side, I have the VRX and VRY attached to the A0 and A1 pins. Those are analog pins. And you'll notice that the red is in the 5 volt and the black is in the ground.
So you'll notice that as I move the joystick in each direction, we start to see essentially the orange line will dictate one direction, and the blue line, the red line will dictate the other direction. But then the other part of that is the button. And the button, you'll notice every time I click it, it either goes up or down. It's just binary. And that's pretty much it. So you can see how it's functioning in real time. All right.